Okay, good evening. This is the continuation of the Salem Traders Row Affordable Housing Information Session. Again, my name is David Cashman. I'm with SEB Housing. For anyone who was watching previously and got cut off, my sincere apologies. Seem to have had a technical difficulty and wasn't able to restart it without creating a new post. So I'm going to just hang on for 1 second. Hopefully anyone who was watching can re-find it and rejoin it, the stream. If not, these streams are always available to be played back after the fact. Hopefully we won't have any additional technical details. Certainly hope not. If for whatever reason we unexpectedly do, I will once again create a new link to the information session and get it started up right away. And if that doesn't work, then we can address that at that time. We may end up needing to pursue a different course, but hopefully it won't. And hopefully we'll just get going here and pick up where we left off. So I'm going to just give it 1 more second. So hopefully anyone who was watching can find it again and rejoin. And then we will get started once again. Okay, so we're going to get started again. My apologies again for the technical difficulties. Again, David Cashman with SEB Housing. This is the information session for the Affordable Units Traders Row in Salem. Again, if for any reason we have additional technical difficulties, I'll create a new YouTube link, and you can just click on that and we'll pick up again. But I hope that won't happen. So where I left off is I was talking about the affordable unit details, talking about Salem, what a great location it is, the historic city. There's public transportation, there's green spaces nearby, you're close to the water, you can have access to Boston vis-a-vis the commuter rail. There's going to be 21 affordable apartments. Jessica Plord from the management team, who was on the phone call, was telling me in the interim that some of the details about the property that I didn't include was that there's a kitchen, there's a game room, there's private conference space, there's co-work from home space, there's outdoor grilling space, and a dog park. So obviously this is a dog-friendly community. There are 21 affordable apartments that will be made available through this opportunity, and they come in a mix of the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom offerings. So 7 of the units are 1-bedroom, 1-bath units. They have about 760 square feet on average, and they are renting for $1,844 per month. That's going to be the affordable rent. And one of those units is fully Group 2 ADA accessible. Then there are 14 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom units. Those have about 1,035 square feet, and the affordable rent for those is $2,034 per month. And one of those units is also fully Group 2 ADA accessible. If you have questions about the affordable rent, I can just tell you briefly that affordable rent is calculated pursuant to a formula that takes into account the area median incomes published by HUD. HUD publishes area median incomes for, I think, really every area within the country. There are a number of different geographic areas within the state of Massachusetts, and Salem happens to be part of the Boston, Cambridge, and Quincy geographic area. And that area spans north of the city, south of the city, Metro West. There are dozens and dozens of cities and towns that are included in that area. And then from the area median incomes, the rents get calculated. And what that means is that rents don't adjust, they don't change depending on any particular applicant's financial circumstances. So, the 1-bedroom rent is the 1-bedroom rent is the 1-bedroom rent. And, two different people that have different financial situations, that rent doesn't adjust. So it's not like Section 8, for example, where, your portion, the amount that you're responsible for paying is tied to your financial picture. There may be other programs like that where your rent or the portion of the rent that you're responsible for is tied to your income. This program is not like that. So the rent is just the rent, and it doesn't change. Now, the rents that I've quoted are not inclusive of electricity, which is heating, cooking, and hot water. However, water and sewer are included in the rent. And each affordable unit tenant will have access to a free parking space on site. So what that means is that the total rent that you would pay each month will actually be a little bit higher than the numbers that I've quoted. And again, that's one of those examples of a number that you don't have to have written down or memorized. The rents are written in the information packet. They're in the application, they're in the ad, they're on our website. So you don't have to memorize them. If you forget, you can just find it there. I should say that rents often change once a year upon lease turnover. So, once you're in a lease, you're locked in at the rate. But in a year's time, when you have to go recertify, they can change. Usually they go up a little bit, not a huge amount. Sometimes they stay the same, and even occasionally, sometimes they go down. But just something to keep in mind that the rents in future years could look a little different than they do now, depending on area median incomes as published by HUD. So the general eligibility requirements for this program are households must have income and assets that qualify under the program rules. There's priority for the larger units based on household size. The program administrators want to make sure that larger households who need 2 bedrooms will get access to those before smaller households. Households cannot own a home upon move-in, and households or their family members cannot have a financial interest in the development, and they cannot be considered a related party. And that's generally, although not exclusively, employees of the management or development entities, which in this case is Dolben. So if you are related to someone at Dolben, or you work for that company, or someone in your family does, that might be a disqualifying factor, and that would be something you'd have to disclose on your lottery application. There's a question to that effect. Related party doesn't come up that often. Occasionally it does. So I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just take a look at that question in the application. If you're unsure, you can reach out to SEB and we'll let you know. So let's go through those requirements one by one, and we'll explore them in a little bit more detail. So the first one is that there are income limits. To be eligible for this opportunity, the applying household has to be under the income limits. Again, so these are ceilings. They're not minimums, they're ceilings that we're talking about right now. And it probably comes as no surprise that if you're going to rent an affordable unit, which is potentially several $100s less than its market rate equivalent, that there'd be an income limit that you'd have to be under to be eligible for it. If you make lots and lots of money, this is not the opportunity for you. So those income limits, and again, these are in the materials, they're on our website, so don't worry about scribbling these down. For a household size of 1, it's $70,750. For a household size of 2, it is $80,850. For a household size of 3, it's $90,950. And for a household size of 4, it is $101,050. So that's gross income. That's gross income. That's pre-tax, pre-deduction, pre-whatever income. It's your gross income that we're looking at. It includes all members of the applying household, with the exception of minor dependents under the age of 18. We do not count their income towards those income limits, nor does it account anything over $480 for full-time students who are dependents. So if you're applying as a family, let's say you have a child, they're a full-time student, they're enrolled. And by the way, full-time is usually defined by the institution. They may not all define it exactly the same. So you get something from if this applies to you, from the institution that the household's child attends, that would indicate whether it's full-time. So for any full-time students who are dependents, we're only counting $480 of any income that they may make. And they may not make any. They may be very busy being full-time students, and that's very normal and understandable. But there are some full-time students who also work. They have a side job. And if that's the case, maybe they make $5,000 in a year, at their job. And in that case, we count $480. And maybe they make $10,000 a year, and that's great. They're really hard working, they're going to school, and they have a side job. We're counting $480 towards the income limit. Further clarification is that when we're talking about exclusions, we're talking about income from jobs. Income from jobs. So 16-year-old with a job, they make $5,000 a year, we don't count it. Full-time student with a job, makes income, makes $10,000 a year, we count $480. But if they're a full-time student receiving, income from some other source that's not a job, then that would get counted fully. So if they're getting, bi-monthly distributions from a trust or something like that, then that would count. Income is a projection over the next 12 months. So when we talk about the income limits, those are the gross income limits for everyone in the applying household's family, with the exceptions that I've noted. And it is when we're making a determination about whether someone is eligible and they're under the income limits, we're projecting forward 12 months and using the best information that's available to us to make an educated projection of what that household is likely to make over the next 12 months. Okay, and so what that means is that, if last year a household made, let's say $80,000, but the pay stubs and all of the documentation that were provided this year, and you'd have to provide your last 5 pay stubs and your last 3 bank statements. If that shows that household is now working less and earning less, then that's what we're going to be using, the 5 most recent to project forward. Okay, so a household isn't necessarily tethered to what they made in a prior year. By that same token, if a household made $70,000 last year, and that's what's reflected in their taxes, but the pay stubs that they provide for this year, for let's say it's July and August, and the first pay stub of September shows, well, this household now works more or they earn more, well, then that's what we're going to be basing it off of. Okay, so the fact that they may have made $70,000 last year on their taxes is not dispositive on the issue. If the more current pay stub show that they're making more, then that's what we're going to have to use to project forward. And income is defined pretty broadly in this program. So when you fill out the application, and by the way, probably the most important piece of advice I can give you in this information session is that if you're interested, get your application into SCB Housing early. Don't wait till the 11th hour. There is a lot of documentation that is required to be provided. Most households in our experience do not submit a 100% complete application on the first try. That's okay. This isn't a test. It's not like you hand it in once and then you don't get to touch it again. Not like that at all. You can hand it in. We'll take a look at it within a few business days. We will respond and we'll let you know the status of our review. And oftentimes after the first review, we will come back and say, well, this is, you've provided A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, but we're still missing these 5 things. And so you take a couple of days and you provide those 5 things and we take a look at it. And a couple of days later, we get back to you again and we say, well, now you're missing actually 2 things. And this can go back and forth a couple of times, depending on how complicated a financial scenario someone has. So you don't want to wait till the very end to get your documents in, because you don't want to be scrambling at the 11th hour to get stuff that may be missing. Then it's kind of tense and stressful, and you're running around, and maybe you're trying to get documents that you don't physically have possession of or access to, and you have to request them from someone else. So now you're relying on someone else to be really diligent and prioritizing your needs, and you don't want to be in that situation. That's not fun. So the deadline is October 12th. Don't wait till October 10th or 11th. If you watch this session, you read the information packet, look at the material, say, hey, this looks great, I want to apply, get that application in. Because the worst that's going to happen is you'll get a reply a few days later from us that says, here are the things that are missing. And then you've got some time to go gather those documents and submit it in a less urgent, less stressful environment. So before I went totally off track there, I was talking about income, and I was also talking about how income is defined pretty broadly in the program, and how in the application we provide an income table, and it lists some of the sort of common sources of income that come up in this program. So you want to take a look at that and go through it closely. If something doesn't apply, you can write not applicable, but you'll find that there's stuff, you may find that there are sources of income listed in that table that you may not necessarily have thought of as income. Now, right at the top is employer. So you list your income that you get from your employer. That's pretty common. I think we all think of that. But maybe you're self-employed on the side. You have a little business on the side selling stuff online. Well, the income that you get from those sales counts. So you'd want to include that too. And maybe you receive child support or alimony, and you don't really think of that as income, but the program says it is. So you have to provide statements for that and demonstrate how much you receive, and that does get counted. Maybe you receive Social Security income, or you have a pension that you're drawing down from regularly. Maybe you receive unemployment compensation, or periodic payments from friends or family members. That one actually comes up with some regularity. Not something that many people think of as income. Program says it is. That one, if it's a one-time, once every while payment or gift from a friend, it's not going to count. But if it's, let's say, if it's regular, okay, if it's regular, so let's just say here every 2 weeks or every month, Uncle Joe, who's a really nice guy and has lots of money, provides you, $500 to pay for some of the expenses that you have in life. That's really nice. That's great. But the program says we have to count that as income. And that frequently comes up in people's bank statements. So, we'll see that there's money coming into the bank. It's not clearly tied to the job that you've told us about. And so we now have to ask questions. Well, where's this, $500 every month? Where does that come from? Oh, I have an Uncle Joe who gives me, assistance. Okay, well, that's great, but, we need a letter from Uncle Joe. We need to detailing the frequency and amount of those gifts and how he intends to provide those going forward, and that's something that we're going to have to count. You may also have assets that generate income, right? Usually things like bank accounts don't generate much, but they can generate some. Or maybe you have an asset that does generate a lot of interest income. That gets factored into the analysis. And there may be other things I haven't mentioned. So anyway, point is there, and this is not something that SCB is just making up. This is what the program says we have to count. I recognize, again, it may be a little bit more expansive than what some people think of when they think of income, but that's what the program says, and so that's what we count. So take your time going through that table, and that will assist you in figuring out what are the income documentation, pieces of documentation that you're going to have to gather and provide. Now, the program itself, the Affordable Housing Program, does not have any minimum income threshold. So what that means is that in theory, you could have no income whatsoever, none at all. And the program would say, well, we don't have any minimum income threshold. You're not ineligible based on that alone. However, the property, like really any property, wants to make sure that tenants are going to be able to afford the rent each month. Because, if you have no source of income, then it's going to be very hard to pay the rent. Now, everything I'm going to say about minimum incomes in a second here is not applicable to voucher holders. Okay, if you have a voucher, you can disregard this. There is no minimum income threshold, either programmatic or based or from the leasing office that applies to. Okay, if you have a voucher, you can disregard this. But if you don't have a voucher,